Hi guys, welcome back to From PSD to HTML5. My name is Dan Wellman, and in this lesson we're going to continue adding the styling for our page templates, this time focusing more on the decorative styling. So we added the high-level layout styling in the last lesson, mostly using Bootstrap's class framework to lay the templates out according to the PSDs. So today we're going to do another pass going deeper into each element to add a finer degree of styling. So let's just take a quick look at the homepage template again. We'll focus on the header first of all, and we can see that straight away there's this big orange strip going right along the top of the page. So we can add that first of all. We need to know exactly how big that is, so we can use the marquee tool just to give a quick measurement there, and that's 10 pixels. So if we open up the theme style sheet that we added, the body of the page, we'll do that as a border on the body. So let's add a border top rule, and we'll just pick out the orange that we need. And let's go and take a look. Okay, so what's happened is we've got the border top, but it's not going full width. So we'll check in the PSD. Let's get rid of that. Yeah, this border at the top is definitely full width. And the reason why ours isn't full width is because of how we've added the container class to the body. Okay, so we're going to need to change that. And the thing about building a site is that you often need to make changes to the underlying markup for decorative purposes. And this is one of those times. So let's go back to the homepage template. And what we need to do is just remove this container class from the body. And what we can do is just add that inside the header. So we'll get rid of the row class in the header as well. The row needs to be inside the container. So first we'll add a class for the container. Obviously that needs to go around all of the elements inside that. And then we can add another container here for the row. So the markup is starting to change considerably now. It does have to, in order to bring across the decorative styling and make that work with the layout. So let's just go back to the page now. Okay, so yeah, some of the page has kind of fallen out of alignment. It's just because of the changes that we've made regarding the class names, but the header we can see is still in the correct kind of layout. So the header itself, if we go back to the PSD, the header itself has a border as well. It's this thin grey border. So we'll just pick out the grey, and we can add a border bottom now to the heading. And we do that in our style sheet, obviously. And this is just a 1 pixel border this time. And again, we want that to be full width, so that's why we've added the container classes inside the header, so that the header itself stays full width. And there we are, there's our full width header with the grey border at the bottom. So next we need to add the logo image that we cut out. So Bootstrap can help us here because it contains a utility class to hide text. So if we so we can add the hide text class to the link itself. And when we go back, yeah, the text is not visible now. So back in the style sheet, so it's the link inside the H1. We need to give that some dimensions. So that will need to be made display block, and then we can get the exact size from Explorer here. So we can see that it's 172 by 25 pixels. So that's the dimensions that the link need to be. And then we can add the background image. And obviously we need to spell that correctly. And when we go back to the page now, we've got a nice clickable logo. So the logo needs to be spaced out slightly. Obviously it's not that close to the orange border in the PSD. It kind of looks like it's central. Is it? We don't know. So let's measure it quickly. Okay, so we've got 26 pixels at the top, but more at the bottom. So how much space have we got at the bottom? Let's just see. So including the border, it's like 29 pixels. So there's 28 pixels in between the logo and the border there, and 26 above. So we can do that using margin on the H1. Bootstrap will give it some margin, but not the right figure for this particular layout. So okay, so that should now be spaced accordingly. We also want to give it some right margin actually, just to push the secondary heading away there. And we can see that there's 24 pixels between those. So okay, so the H2 needs to be made smaller, so we can do that here. And the font size that should be, let's just use the text tool, and then we can open up the character panel here, and that will give us all of the details about the text itself. So we can see it should be 14 pixels with a line height of 25. And let's just see what Bootstrap gives us. So the font size is wrong and the line height is wrong from Bootstrap, so we'll need to fix both of those things. And yeah, it's currently a serif font, so we just want to get the sans serif font, which we already know is the correct font, and we'll just copy that and we'll put that here. Okay, so that's the right size now. Obviously it needs to float next to the logo, so we can make that happen again using another couple of Bootstrap classes. So if we just go back to the underlying markup, we can add the pull left class to both of these things, and that would just float them alongside each other. And obviously now, because the H group only contains floated elements, we need to add the clear fix class, just so that the floats are clear correctly. Okay, so that's starting to look correct now. The spacing needs to be adjusted slightly, so let's just see exactly how far away from the top border that needs to be. And it's 34 pixels high. We can see that here in the info panel. Still kind of looks wrong. And the reason for that is line height. So there's a useful little browser plugin that you should use, and that's a page ruler. So we said it was 34 pixels, so now we can just adjust that in the browser, and that will then be in the correct location. So it's actually 29 we need, and that will take into account the line height as well. Okay, so that's looking much better now, much more like it should do. So last of all, we need to get the nav looking correct. Obviously the items should float next to each other, so there's a Bootstrap class for this. And if we go back to the home template here, if we add the class inline to the list itself, and then go back to the page, then Bootstrap will take away the list item markers and just float the items next to each other. So that's a step in the right direction. Still not entirely correct though. The font size is wrong and the font family is wrong. So there's a couple of changes that we need to make. Let's just go back to the PSD and remind ourselves what it should look like. So we want to make these inline block first of all, and we need to add some right padding to them because they're quite spaced out in the PSD. So we need to add some padding around each of the links. As we can see, there's quite a bit of spacing at the left and right edges there. So how much spacing exactly? Let's take a look. So yeah, 22 pixels is right, so let's add that. And there's that grey border as well, so let's just turn off the grid so that we can pick out the grey correctly. And we can just add so we can add the grey border now. For the general nav A selector, we'll just add a border right and a border left. And it's 2 pixels thick this time. we've already got the grey out. We'll just add the border left now as well. And the font is actually much bigger, so we'll use the text selection tool again. Let's open up the character panel. So the font size is 20 pix, and we use the general font rule this time, and the font is italic, and it's actually the serif font, the Georgia, that's used. So there's a couple of other things we need for the nav as well. The list element itself inside the nav, if we just go back to looking at it in the browser, we can see that this has some margin bottom, which we don't need. So we can just set the margin there to 0. So let's take a look at the page and see how that's coming along. Okay, so it's starting to look like it does in the PSD, but as you can see, there are still a number of changes that we need to make. Now, we want to get the nav pretty much centered vertically in the header. So we can do that by adding quite a large line height to the list items. We just measure the entire height of the header here. It's 79 pix high, so if we give our list items a line height of 79, then that should vertically center them. So we'll need to override some of Bootstrap's styling. So if we use the inline class within our selector, then that will just make sure our selector overrides the Bootstrap one. So we'll take off the padding that gets added automatically, and we'll set our line height. So now we need to fix the borders as well. So the first item doesn't need a left border, and the last item doesn't need a right border. So let's just get rid of those. So we'll just set the border left there to none on the A inside the first child inside the list. And we can do the same for the last child as well. So we'll update that to last child, and we want to change that to border right. In fact, we want to just switch off the borders entirely for these ones. Okay, so we're almost there now. Because there's only 3 items in our list here, we could have just added border right and border left just to the second nav item there, but we would have needed a unique class name just to target that. And obviously if we had, say, 5 links in there instead of 3, then it would be quicker using the general styling on all list items and then switching off the borders on the first and last children. And as you can see, here's our 4-column container, and it's not quite wide enough to contain the links. So obviously browsers are not Photoshop, so you'll often find that there are kind of very minor differences in the amount of things that we can include on one line looking at the PSD and the HTML page. So what we can do here, we can just reduce the padding on our nav elements until they actually fit on one line. So yeah, we need to knock that down. So if we set that to 14 instead, then they'll all fit on one row. So the spacing's a little tighter than it is in the PSD, but I think the most important thing is that the general feel is preserved and the nav items are all on one line. So let's just correct that in the style sheet. And because the footer is so similar to the header, and because our CSS is nice and general, then when we go down to the footer here, the footer almost looks right. So let's just fix that now as well. So in the same way that we added the container and the row to the header, we just need to go down and add these to the footer as well. So let's get rid of the row class there, and let's add these containers in. And let's just go back to the page again. So it's starting to take shape, the footer. So we can add the inline class to the list as well. Okay, so we're almost right here. If we go back to the PSD and we'll just go right down to the bottom, and we can see that the list items are actually much smaller. So what size are they? They're 14 pixels, and this time they're actually Arial, so we can change that as well. So back in our theme style sheet, then we can just add a couple of extra rules here for the footer nav A's. So they're much smaller and they're a different font. They're not italic. And also so we can combine all of these. Okay, so that's looking much better now. Obviously, the line height on the list items in the header is very large. So let's just knock that back for the footer one. And we need to match our selector here as well. And I think it will need about 25. So let's take a look. Yeah, so that's much better now. The footer itself, if we look at the PSD, we can see that the footer's got this grey border at the top. So we can copy the border bottom that we added to the header and just add that to the footer, and we'll change it to a border top. And all we need to do now is just space things out nicely. So how much spacing do we need? Well, let's have a look. 34 pixels. So we'll start off with a padding value of 34. And because of the line height, we're probably going to have to reduce that slightly. Let's see. Perfect. So it actually wants to be 28. Great. Okay, so the header and the footer now are looking as they should do. Probably want to add a bit of padding bottom as well, just because there's some space at the bottom as well. So let's see, yeah, it's very similar. So let's just go with 28 for the bottom as well. Awesome. So now our header and footer should be completely styled as per the designs. So we can also apply these changes to the list page template as well. So just what I mean there is the changes to the containers. So let's just copy over the header and the footer again to the list page. And we can get rid of that container class on the body. We'll do the same with the footer as well. So we wouldn't normally have to worry about copying common elements like the headers and footers, because if we were actually building this for real, then these would be like server-side includes, or they'd be in a master page or something. So there'd only ever be one instance of these shared elements anyway. But because we're just building it with flat HTML, we just need to make sure those are maintained in between the different pages. And if we just go back to the page briefly, you'll see that although the header and the footer are aligned correctly, the main content area of the page isn't, it's left aligned. So the reason for that is because we removed the container class from the body. So back in the main section here, we can just add a container here as well. And we'll just do so that was the list page. We'll do the same in the home page as well. Looks like it's picked up the row fluid class automatically, so let's just get rid of that. It should just be row. Great, okay, so that's back to how it was. Awesome. So in this part we added some much more detailed styling now to our templates in the header and footer areas, and we had to make some changes to the underlying markup to accommodate the design. So this is very, very common, and you find that you often have to do that, but that's still the best way to do it. You should still start off with the minimum amount of markup needed, and just make changes as you go, the barest minimum of changes to get the design to come out on the pages exactly as it is in the PSD. So determining all of the CSS was a little tedious. We had to go through and use the color picker and the font tool quite a lot. There is a better way of doing this, and that's what we're going to look at in the next lesson. We'll install a plugin for Photoshop which will help us to gather some of the CSS that we need. Thanks for watching.